Hi, my name is Stephen Cronin and I'm a content specialist here at Envato, and I'm going to talk to you about submitting content to Envato Market, specifically submitting WordPress themes to ThemeForest. And I'll mention Envato Elements a little bit near the end, but most of this is focused on Envato Market. So first up, we're going to talk about what to submit. And the obvious answer is good content. But what does that mean for a WordPress theme? And there's several things here I'm going to mention, but the first is demand. You need to build something that people want to buy. There are some common things you can do in creating products, such as working out the ideas for what you're going to build, doing some competitor analysis to work out is it worth building, and if it is, you can then lead on to what are you going to do to differentiate yourself from existing items, and getting some validation from users about will people actually buy it. So those are all things that any business should do when they're creating products. The one I want to actually talk to you about is something else you need to do, which is to look to the future. That's incredibly important at the moment in the WordPress theme ecosystem because there's so much change going on. For example, we've seen a shift away from themes to builders for where people get their design. It's still a very small shift at the moment, but it's growing. So for example, people are getting Elementor and starting there and building their design through that. So that's one change that's happening. And we have a new content type called template kits, which is launching any day now. And you should be thinking, can I build items for that content type? But there's also Gutenberg. And as it grows into a full site builder, we are going to see things like block patterns and block-based themes come to life. They're already being worked on and they'll be a reality sometime soon. And once they become real, then people are going to work out how to sell them. And we will probably have content types around those that you can use. So you should be watching what's going on in this space and getting ready for the day that those things become things you can act on. Okay, back to what makes a good WordPress theme. As well as demand, you need to think about visual design. If your theme looks like it's from 2017, it's going to be harder for it to compete in today's market. So make sure your design is fresh and modern. Get inspirations from Dribbble, from websites you visit, even other items. But don't copy them. Just get inspiration and then build your own unique thing. UX is very important because a theme in today's world is often installing demo content and plugins and other things. And it's a theme's responsibility to make sure that all that stuff fits together and it's a nice, smooth experience for the user. Also, items need to be fast, both for the visitors and for the user in the back end. They need to be secure, that goes without saying, and code needs to be good quality. Now that's a lot of stuff that you need to be doing, and if you can't do all of that yourself, then you might want to partner up with someone. If you have certain strengths in some areas, but weaknesses in others, find someone who complements you. Now, you do need to be careful. There's a lot that goes into partnerships, making sure you pick the right person, making sure you're both protected if things break down. So, you've built an item and you're ready to submit. What do you need to do before you submit? The first thing is to read the requirements. Well, actually, you should do that way before you submit, before you even build your item. But still, make sure you've read them. We have in-depth requirements for WordPress themes. There's 6 different subsections, and you need to read all of those and get all of your developers to read them as well. They're long, but it's all outlined there for you so that you can build it in a way that's going to be a nice, smooth experience when you get to the review process. So it's worth investing your time in that. Also, run Envato theme check. Anything that's required, you must fix before you submit. Anything that are warnings or information you don't necessarily have to fix, I'd recommend that you do, unless there's a good reason that you can't. And if there's a good reason that you can't, then you should explain that to the reviewer when you submit, because these things may or may not be problems. So if you have some information that will help the reviewer make that decision, please provide that up front. Also, make sure you install the theme unit test data and check out all the different pages to make sure that your theme is not breaking. For example, this is the image alignment one. You can check whether your images are being put in the right place and it's matching up with what it should be doing. And there are a lot of different posts with different content, and you just need to make sure that your theme is not breaking on any of those pages and everything is styled appropriately. Now, both of those, Envato theme check and theme unit test data, they're both written about in our requirements, and you can find links to where to install those there as well. Also, test different versions of PHP, test on mobile and on different resolutions and in different browsers. The more testing you do, the better. If your theme is supposed to work with WooCommerce, for example, make sure that it actually works with the latest version of WooCommerce. PHP Code Sniffer might be worth using. It will throw up a lot of errors, and not all of them are real ones that you need to fix. It does have a lot of false positives. But if you resolve a lot of that stuff, your item will be better. Also, you can install the PHP compatibility sniffs to use with the Code Sniffer, and it can tell you which versions of PHP that your item can run under. And as I said, test everything you can think of. Okay, so you've done all that, you've submitted. What happens next? Now, most of you will know this already. It goes into the review queue. A reviewer is assigned to it once it reaches the top. The item's reviewed and a decision is made. And that decision will be either a hard rejection, a soft rejection, or approved. Now, I'm assuming most of you know the difference between soft rejection and hard rejection, but very quickly, a soft rejection is one that's close to being approved, that with some changes we feel will make it over the line. A hard rejection is something where it's a long way from the line and we don't feel that it can make it there without basically being changed so much that it's essentially a new item. Now, it's very rare that you get approved the first time you submit an item. It normally goes around in a soft rejection cycle. I think the average is 4.5 reviews before an item is accepted. So expect for it to go around and to get feedback that you need to act on, etc. Next, I'm actually going to talk to you a little bit about what we do during the review. The first thing we do is to look at your demo site for obvious design issues, including at different resolutions, mobile, etc. So anything that's a design issue, we try and find at this point before we even download the item. And most hard rejections happen at this point. It's very rare for us to hard reject something for code issues or other issues. It's normally the design. Once we've passed that, we'll download the item, we run theme check, we check it with the theme unit test data, and we also check for any obvious problems. So any PHP errors or anything like that, or just anything that's broken or looks wrong. We make sure it works with the plugins that you've advertised. So if you say it's a WooCommerce theme, we make sure that it works with WooCommerce and that products are styled appropriately, etc. And then we look at the code and we both search for some common patterns. So things around security or versions of plugins that we have vulnerabilities in them, or code patterns that we don't want people to be using, for things that can help us find where the requirements are being broken. And we do a visual code inspection at the same time. We don't check every single line in every single file of a theme, but we do check some common files, and we also do a random sample of files we just open to see what's happening inside them. Now, at the end of that, if you end up being rejected, what should you do? Well, the first thing I'd like to ask you to do is to keep calm. We understand that it can be very frustrating to receive rejections, especially when you've spent so long building an item and put so much effort into it, and then to get it sent back saying there's problems or we want you to fix things. That can be very frustrating, and we understand that. However, reviewers are just doing their job. They're not trying to hurt you in particular. They're just following their job that they're supposed to do. And we'd really like you to work with the reviewers. And feel free to go back to the reviewers and ask them questions about some of the things that they've asked you. They can clarify. They can't always answer everything, but it's worth you talking to them. We don't get everything right all the time. We're human. And consistency is very hard, especially when you have so many different themes, so many requirements, and the amount of things that themes can do is actually quite a lot. There's a lot of variety in the way they go about things, and basically trying to get a team of reviewers to review as one is really hard in that environment. We do exercises to try and keep them consistent, and we do work on that, but we do need to ask you for patience. And although I understand it's very frustrating for you to see someone else get away with something that a reviewer has told you you are not allowed to do, that will happen occasionally. I apologize for that. We do try and improve it, and we do ask for your patience, so thanks. If you get a soft rejection, then you're going to get a list of issues that we'd like you to address, so please go ahead and do that. If there's a certain issue that you don't agree with, you can go back to the reviewer and say, hang on, I don't agree with this one. As long as you're providing detail with some logical reasoning about why you think that you should be allowed to do something. And the reviewer will consider that. Now, there's no guarantees that they will allow it. We are trying to run a marketplace with lots of authors and lots of items, and we need to try and have a single set of requirements that cover everything. So it doesn't really scale for us to be providing lots of different exceptions, because one author will say, but you let that author do this, now I should be allowed to do it, and things get out of control very quickly. So that's why we might end up turning around. Even if you have a good reason why you want to do something for your item, we might turn around and say, sorry, you can't do it, we need you to do it this way. And although that's frustrating for you again, we do have to ask you to do that. You can ask for a second opinion. Don't go back arguing again and again with the reviewer. What you can do is submit a ticket, and that will come through, and either the senior reviewer or myself will take a look at it and we'll consider it. Once again, there's no guarantees. We might make the same decision, but we will consider that and see if it's something that we can allow. Please don't do that for everything that doesn't get accepted. Only for things that you have a really good case for. If we get too many of those, that might be something we have to stop doing. I also want to mention that we can't suggest design changes for you. So we might turn around and say, you don't have enough white space, things are too crowded. We can't tell you where to put white space or what to do exactly. We just tell you what the issue is, and it's up to you to go away and work out how to improve it. I know that's frustrating because sometimes, you get a list of things you need to fix, but no details about how to fix it. Where do you start? You could probably seek extra opinions from other authors on the forums, etc. For that sort of thing. But I just wanted to mention that because for some things we can tell you. We can say, stop using this function and start using this function, and it's very clear what you need to do for your item to be accepted. But we can't do that for design changes, and I just wanted to explain that's why. If it's a hard rejection, well, that really sucks. I know that sucks. And to make it worse, we can't give you any information about why you got hard rejected as well. That is very frustrating for authors that get hard rejections. I just wanted to explain why. It's not because we don't care. If we could, we would provide that information. But because of the scale of things, we just can't do it. We get so many submissions that we're not able to provide any detail about why we hard reject things. However, as I mentioned before, almost all hard rejections are related to design. So that is almost certainly what you need to be looking at to improve your item. So for your next item, make sure that you focus on the design and improve that. You can also look at new items to see what sort of designs are being accepted. Or you can ask on the forums, because authors are often happy to provide some feedback on your design. I'd also like to say, don't give up too easily. I've actually had authors come up to me at conferences and say, when I first started, I got rejected and rejected and rejected. I almost gave up, but then I got through and my item started selling and I found review much easier the next time around and things improved. So I just want to encourage you, if you're getting rejected, go away, work out how you can improve your item, but don't just give up. Okay, so let's talk about some of the common rejection reasons. And we'll start with design. So in the design area, the things that we see the most common are themes, or the design being too generic, too bland, or not even looking premium. So things like the design is just sort of waiting for stuff to come from a builder. There's actually no design to the pages without that. Or they look like something you'd find on WordPress.org, or they're too plain. Now, people do like to build minimalistic designs, themes. That's great. There's no problem with doing that. But you need to add something unique and have some sort of character to it. If you make it too plain and the fonts being too bland or too common, then you end up with your theme being something where there's hundreds of those on WordPress.org. And we really need it to be a step above those free themes. So you need to put a lot of effort into a minimalistic design to make sure that it stands out and has its own character. We see a lot of poor typography choices. Now, obviously, with a lot of themes, the users will change the fonts, but your default fonts when the user first gets it should be really solid. We see a lot of padding and alignment issues. And a big one is we find authors putting a lot of effort into styling the homepage, but not styling the archive pages, the search pages, the category pages, the 404 page. You need to make sure that they're all styled properly because we check all those. And we do find authors missing that. We also find images and logos not being ready or optimized for high resolution devices or screens. We find theme unit test data issues as mentioned before, and also a lot of mobile or responsive styling issues. So make sure you're checking those things. When it comes to code quality, the biggest thing is theme check issues not being resolved. So as I've mentioned lots of times, make sure you run that and resolve those issues. Also make sure you turn on WP debug so that you can find any errors being thrown. We particularly look for PHP errors as well. So make sure that is all removed before you upload. Now, plugin territory and content generation is one that I'll actually like to talk to you about. This is something which is not perfect. There is no perfect solution for this. But if a customer changes their theme, we don't want them to lose their content. We don't want custom post types content to disappear from the front of their website. We don't want their analytics code to stop working, etc. So the best solution is all of that stuff goes into a plugin that comes along with the theme. It's not perfect because they could turn off the plugin, or when they change themes, that stuff might keep running, but maybe custom post type entries aren't styled properly, etc. But there is no perfect solution for this, and this is the best. And this is what we want you to do, is to put all of that stuff into a plugin that can continue running after the theme is changed. And then also on the code quality side is make sure you prefix everything except for third-party libraries. And we see both of those a lot with people not prefixing everything or people actually prefixing third-party libraries. So please be careful with those. We see files being included the wrong way. Everything needs to be enqueued properly, and the correct functions need to be used to provide the path to the file. That's really important. So things like child themes can load the right files. We see people installing and activating plugins without asking the user. It's smoother, but it's also, in this day and age with privacy issues, you really need to inform the user what you're going to do and get them to take action to make that happen. So get them to click a yes button or something. We also see problems with translation and text domains, and security issues are huge, so I'll talk about them separately. And one of the most common things we see is people not escaping output. They might escape some output, but they miss some, etc. So make sure that all your output is escaped. And also we are talking about late escaping. So we want you to escape it at the point of output. Now the reason that we want you to do that is because we're separating the concerns. The escaping belongs with the output so that you know it's been escaped properly. A lot of authors escape things further up in the code, but as programs and themes and software changes over time, you can't always be sure what's happening further up in the program. So maybe you're not escaping something because it's not dynamic, it's coming from hard-coded somewhere, but maybe a couple of months later you're going to go and rework that whole part of the program, and you might make it dynamic, and there might be several different places where it's changed, and it can get quite complicated. So by outputting or escaping when you output, you can always make sure that no matter what happened earlier on, it's always going to be safe. Okay, as well as that, there's a bunch of other security things you need to be aware of: validating, sanitizing input. User capabilities is something we see people doing wrongly a lot, not putting user capabilities in there. But there's a whole bunch of things. So go and check our requirements and read all of those and make sure that you're doing those things. Security is just so important. You do not want to be responsible for your customers having their websites hacked, etc. It's not good for the customers, obviously, and I've talked to authors who have been in that situation. It's not good for the authors either. That's something you really want to avoid. So it's worth especially making sure that your items are as secure as possible. Another thing is keeping things up to date. So we're talking everything. The plugins you include in your zip file need to be the latest versions. The libraries you build your theme on have to be the latest version. Your theme must work with any advertised plugin. So if it works with WooCommerce, it needs to work with the latest version of WooCommerce and the latest version of WordPress. And now look, that takes a lot of work, because as you update all the things, it might actually impact your theme. You might have to change your theme to cater for some of that. So we understand that takes work, but it's really essential, because you can't ask customers to stay on old versions of those things, because there's a steady stream of security updates and things like that for a lot of those things. So you can't say stay on the old version of WooCommerce for 6 months. It needs to work with the latest version. Other common rejection reasons, the Gutenberg optimized attribute. We find people tick that a lot because, well, Gutenberg works with everything, but we have a definition of what Gutenberg optimized means for us, and that's in the requirements, so check that out. But please don't choose the attribute unless you've gone ahead and met that definition. Also, be careful with your naming. Generally, we have a brand such as Envato, and then a separator maybe, and then some sort of description of what the theme is. It's okay to put 1 or 2 keywords into the description part, but do not put too many and do not get too repetitive with that or we'll reject you. And of course, everything else in the requirements need to be met. But the ones that I've mentioned here are the ones we see most common. So I wanted to call those out to you as things to pay attention to. Okay, elements. So if you do want to submit your items to elements, the first thing to note is that you have to actually be accepted as an elements author. You have to apply. There's a form online. You fill that in, and then we do some processes around it. If you are accepted, then there's some things you do need to take note of. First, there's a higher visual design line than ThemeForest. Now, if you have just submitted a theme to ThemeForest and it's been approved, it will probably get onto elements. Not 100% sure, but it's likely to. However, older themes have a lot more trouble getting onto elements because the design is often not as good as the newer ones. That leads me on to my next point, which is I'd really ask you to consider using newer items if you're trying out elements. A, they're more likely to be accepted because of the design issue, but also authors testing out elements often seem to use old items. But the problem with that is that subscribers may not really want the older items. So if you try with some of your better items or your newer items, you might find that you get a much different result than trying your old items. The other thing is purchase code activation is not allowed on elements, and that's because subscribers don't have purchase codes. And they get really upset when they get an item and they're using it and all of a sudden they have to put in a purchase code, which they don't have. Now, the thing about this is that ThemeForest and Elements share the same zip file, which means you can't have purchase code activation in your ThemeForest themes if you're going to put them on Elements. The one exception to that is the one-click update. That's the only thing that's allowed to have a purchase code activation step. So that is something that you need to take into account before you decide whether you're going to come onto Elements. The other thing is you can't have links on the demo site. Subscribers once again get quite upset when they're on Elements and they have an item that they like, they're thinking about downloading it, they click the preview, they go to another site, there's a link which says buy here and they click it and it takes them to ThemeForest and asks them for more money. They obviously don't like that because that's not the expectation. So you can't link away to anywhere else from the demo site. The only thing you can do is link back to Elements. Now, of course, you want those links for other customers. So if somebody has come from Elements, the URL will have a URL parameter so that you can conditionally hide those links for Elements subscribers. And that brings me to the end of what I was talking about today. A very quick recap of some of the important points. Build a good product to start with, obviously. Make sure you're familiar with the requirements. Make sure you run theme check and test before uploading. And both of those steps will give you a much better review experience. And keep patient and don't give up. And that's all. I hope that you've got some benefit out of this and that some of the information has been useful. I hope that your review experiences in the future are smooth, and I hope you have lots of products that sell a lot. Thank you very much, and bye.